Hello everyone, and welcome to the second chapter of my introduction to ZBrush. So this is where we left off, and before we get into brushes, I will show you like two issues people run into when they start with ZBrush. So let's say you wanted to move your object and then you moved it off the canvas, and then you wanted to hit F to center it. But what you did instead was hit R. And now you see like this gizmo here. So what happened? What happened is you left the draw mode and entered the transformation mode. So when you press Q, you will see that at the top here, I will jump to draw again. And now the gizmo is gone. But these three modes, move, scale, and rotate, you access those by pressing W, E, and R. And it will all look the same because this kind of gizmo is applied. And this is how you make like transformation, move stuff around, rotate stuff. But we will get to this gizmo later on. I just want to show you what's happening so you can avoid it or you don't feel lost and like, okay, now all of a sudden stuff isn't like working anymore or I can't draw anymore. So this is what happened. You simply left the draw mode and entered the transformation mode. So let's hit Q to go back to draw. Another issue you might run into is instead of pressing R or F, you press T. Luckily, in newer versions of ZBrush, you get this kind of warning that when you press T, you enter or leave the edit mode, the 3D edit mode, and switch to a 2.5D mode. So let's say we say, okay, switch. Maybe we did that by accident. And now all of a sudden, we see that the brush is grayed out and also the edit button is grayed out. So when we start drawing now, we actually draw this kind of demo soldier the whole time. And we can't really navigate anymore. When we click somewhere on the canvas, we just keep drawing like more demo soldiers. So what we're doing right now is we are in 2.5D mode and we are drawing our active subtool onto the canvas. It's just a document. So this is why all we have to do is press Control N to clear the canvas. Then draw a demo soldier. And simply enter edit mode again by pressing T. And now you see when we press T, yes, switch. Just again, T. Now we're in edit mode. Now this demo soldier we drew last is available again, and we can hit Control N to clear the rest of the canvas. And now we're back to normal. We have our gray outline. We are in edit mode. We are in draw mode, and everything is back to normal. So yeah, I just wanted to show it to you guys because almost every beginner runs into this kind of problem. So I hope this way you can avoid it and you don't feel lost. All right. So this was it about navigation and interface. Let's get into brushes. So let's open a new project for that. And we open the lightbox with the comma key or with that button over here. And just select this polysphere here. Double click on it. Say no, we don't want to save. And now we have this polysphere. I'll turn off the floor because I don't need it. And now by default, this standard brush is selected. And I have the standard brush on my button 1. And now is the time to install my interface. I'm sorry, this is maybe weird. You know, you open this workshop and you want to get started, and now all of a sudden you have to go to another website and download my interface. I put the Gumroad link in the description below, and there's a reason for me to do it this way. I've taught ZBrush to students, and when they used my interface, they learned it faster. Why is that? I think the most intimidating part about ZBrush is the interface. So by using my interface, you can learn my workflow and get comfortable in this new environment. And when you're good enough, you can change the interface. You can make your own interface, you know? But I think it's just hard when you learn about all these new tools and they're hidden in these palettes somewhere and you have to find them every time. So this is why my interface is really, really cool because I have the most important stuff on hotkeys. For example, these palettes here, quick mesh modifier, quick selection modifier, and quick brush modifier. And I have those also here where all the other palettes are, but I created those on my own. But again, everything that is in here is somewhere hidden in ZBrush. But I think it's like a really big advantage for you to be able to just access all of these options in here. So I mainly use my palettes and the tool palette for like 95% of my stuff. And this is why I want you to download my interface now. Okay, you've downloaded it. So let's install my interface. So here's how to do it. You go to Preferences, Configuration or Config, and then Load UI. And then you simply navigate to the file. After you've done that, you have to click on Store Configuration. So every time you start ZBrush, you have this interface. This is very, very important. So load it and store it. And then you have to do the same for the hotkeys. So click on hotkeys here, load, and after they are loaded, press store. So you have them every time you start ZBrush. And this is really, really cool because, normally when you press B, you see all the brushes ZBrush has, and they're even more hidden in the lightbox. So you see that's really, really overwhelming. And to access a brush, you have to press B, then for example, M, and then V for the move topological brush. Okay, so you pressed 3 buttons now to access a single brush. With my interface, you have the most important brushes on the buttons 1 to 6. Standard, Move, Clay, Damp Standard, Trim Dynamic, and Inflate. So this is super easy, right? You can jump between these brushes like really, really fast. And I'll show you what each of these brushes do and how we change brush settings. And I think this just speeds up your workflow a lot. So let's start with the standard brush. You can see all the options for your active brush at the top. They are here. And we will start with what is the draw size, the intensity, Z add, Z sub, and the focus shift. All right. So let's you see that there's 2 points on my sphere because the symmetry is activated. I will deactivate the symmetry for now by pressing X on the keyboard, and then I simply draw the line. Okay. So now when we rotate to the side, we see what's actually happening. The standard brush applies or adds this kind of area to the object and has some kind of very round fall off. Okay. So when we decrease the draw size, pretty obvious, that gets much smaller. When we increase the draw size, it gets much bigger. Pretty self-explanatory. I'll press Ctrl Z to go back. And next to draw size, you see that dynamic is active. So what does that mean? If dynamic is active, the brush will always remain the same size. So when I draw on the object and I zoom out and I keep drawing on the object, the brush still has the same size. When I double click on dynamic and now it's grayed out, you see that when I zoom in, my brush gets smaller, and when I zoom out, my brush is bigger. So it changes the brush size depending on how much I zoomed in. So things that when I zoom in, that I want to work on details, and that's why my brush gets smaller. When I move away with the camera, the brush gets bigger. I rarely use that, but maybe that's something you like. I just go back for now and double click dynamic again and decrease the brush size. Okay. Next is the focal shift. I do not change the focus shift too often, but I think it's important for you to understand what the focus shift does because different brushes have different focus shift settings. I think when for example, the damn standard brush on 4 has a focus shift by default of -14. Or the trim dynamic brush has a focus shift of -56. And I think it really helps to understand what the focus shift does. So let's go back to the standard brush by hitting 1 on the keyboard. And with the focus shift 0, this is what it looked like when I applied the brush. So let's go to like, I don't know, -50, draw again, then go to like +50 and draw again. And you see that when I increase it, that this inner circle of the brush is getting smaller. And when I decrease it, the inner circle is getting bigger. So now when we look from the side, we'll see what that actually means. So when the focus shift is smaller, you see that the intensity of the brush is getting dragged to the side. And when the focus shift is bigger, the intensity is getting dragged to the middle of the brush. So you see that this one is a little bit more pointy than our standard curve. And here it has like this whole area got like wider. So this is what the focus shift does. It drags the intensity to the outside or the inside of the brush. Okay. That's the focus shift. Let's go back, Control Z. Next up is the Z intensity. And the Z intensity controls like how much or how strong the brush is applied. Now we have like 25. And if I go over a couple of times, it gets stronger and stronger. But I could increase the intensity. And now with just one stroke, I have the same intensity as like painting over it a couple of times. Or I can like go really crazy to 100. And you see the difference immediately. Okay, I think this one is really clear. Smaller intensity, it gets like more and more subtle. Higher intensity, it gets stronger. Above intensity, you see Z add and Z sub. And most brushes are on Z add, so we apply. Let me increase the intensity again. So it's like adding volume. And if we would click on Z sub, we would subtract volume. Really, really cool. But the thing is, you don't really have to press on sub because when you draw, surprise, surprise, by pressing the Alt key, the brush will be inverted. So I can draw normally, and when I press the Alt key, I subtract from the surface, which is really, really cool. All right. Now you see I clicked like Control Z to go back a lot of time. But that is not necessary because at the top we have a timeline. So when I click on this under history here, I can simply drag and go forward in time again. Now I see everything I've done. Maybe I don't want to go back like all the way to the sphere, but maybe, I don't know, I like this here and then I can continue sculpting from that point. And if you've actually done like a lot of sculpting, and then you want to go back and start drawing again, ZBrush even asks you like, do you want to get rid of all this progress you've made? And then you can hit OK and say, yeah, this is where I want to start from. OK. So that was the add, the sub, intensity, draw size, and focus shift. The other parameters, mRGB, RGB, and material channel, these all control like color. We will get into color at a later stage. Let me drink something here before we go to our next brush. All right. Next brush, shortcut 2, is the move. The move works a little different. It doesn't really apply or subtract from our object, but we can move whatever we click on into a certain like direction. So most of the time I use the like a bigger draw size for the move. Let's go back. And it's always dependent like on the camera, right? And the thing is, you can make like very, very big changes to your shapes with this tool, or like control the pose or proportion. So this is really, really like a very, very powerful brush. And you see like a couple of times I clicked another hotkey to change the size or the all the information we have above here on the brush, because there's two ways to do it. You can hit S on the keyboard, and then you can decrease the draw size. This is really cool because you don't have to go all the way up here, change the draw size, and then come back. Like I said, ZBrush like really encourages you to spend as much time really creating while you're on the canvas. So you can just press S, change the draw size, make changes, make a bigger draw size, make changes, and only by hitting S. This is super, super useful. There's another shortcut where you can access the draw size and a bunch of other options, and that's the spacebar. But it's different from the S that you just have to hit like once. You actually have to press the spacebar and hold it down, so all this information is visible. So you can see there's a lot of stuff you can change there. I don't like it as much because maybe you just want to change the draw size, but all of a sudden you click and change the focus shift. But this is not what you wanted to do. You wanted to change the draw size. So I don't use it as often. I use the S button like much more. Okay. But we'll probably, I use like hotkeys for most of this stuff. Z intensity, I changed the Z intensity here and also the RGB intensity for drawing if needed. But yeah, mostly it's just hitting S and changing the draw size. Okay, so the move brush actually has another like function, and that's a little harder to explain. How do I do that? Because when let's make the draw size a little bit bigger. So let's say I want to move this part here like towards me. How can I do that? Yeah, well, I had to rotate the camera and then move this part and then rotate the camera back. But maybe that's not as accurate as I want it to be. Now I want to move like this part to the side. Okay, but it's still not in the center. If you press Alt while before like clicking on the object, it actually pulls it towards the polygon or the point normal. Damn it, what is a normal? I think I have to draw that to make it clear. If we look at our object and maybe even turn on the polyframe mode by hitting Shift F, you see that this sphere consists of a lot of polygons, a lot of little squares. And each of the square has a direction. So let me access my drawing tool here again. Okay. So each of these squares at its center has a normal that is perpendicular. Let me go back. That is perpendicular to the surface. And this is also the direction this polygon is facing. And the points have the same. they're facing in a certain direction. So this is how ZBrush knows like which side of the polygon you want to draw on. Okay. So what the move brush is doing when you're pressing Alt, it knows what kind of surface normal is below, and then simply drags the polygons and points into the direction of the surface normal. And this is why I can drag this point to the camera, because the surface normal of the points and polygons are like pointed this way, right? All perpendicular. I hope that makes sense. All right. Of course, you can also do it like the other way around, right? You can press Alt and then move inwards. But there is no like subversion for the move tool. You just move it into a certain direction. That's all. Okay, so that's the move tool. On 3, we have the clay brush. And there are a bunch of different clay brushes inside of ZBrush. I like the standard clay a lot because it has a very smooth fall off. So when I decrease the draw size, I've like this really feels like working with clay, right? You add structure to your object, or with Alt, you can subtract. And I feel like you have a lot of control while creating forms and shapes. Let's go back. I have another clay brush in my hotkeys that is a little stronger. And that's called the clay build-up, exactly for that reason. So on 3, I have clay, and on Alt 3, I have the clay build-up. And you see, yes, that this one is like much more aggressive. And I can, even like when I go like a little bigger, I can build up forms or shapes like very, very, very fast. And this is also the reason I think here you see it like really, really good, why it is so important to use a tablet when working on ZBrush, because all of these brushes work with pressure intensity. So I can make like very, very slight strokes, not much pressure applied, or I can apply a lot of pressure and get a shape like this out very, very fast. So this is why I think that with the mouse, it's not really possible to work well. I mean, I've seen people do like great stuff in ZBrush, but to be honest, I think it's a waste of time because you just need so much more time. I'm changing pressure while I'm sculpting like all the time. So I don't really see the reason to do it with a mouse. Of course, if you don't have a tablet, but if I would not have a tablet, I would probably not start with ZBrush. I would start with, I don't know, with a polygon-based program like 3ds Max, Cinema 4D, Maya, or Blender, you know, and not would get like into sculpting when I don't have a tablet. All right. So the next brush is not on 4, it's hidden on Shift, because when you press Shift, you see that my cursor turns blue and that also the brush settings on the left side change. So the smooth brush is just awesome because it smooths the surface. So when I press Shift and then draw, you see that this whole area is getting smoothed. Ooh, fancy. And you see better what's happening when we turn on the polyframe mode by hitting Shift F. See that it changes the arrangement of the polygons and smoothens out the surface. Nice. All right. So let's go all the way back to our sphere. Okay. And I think that's okay for now. We have more brushes like the dam standard, the dynamic, and the inflate. But the principles are like always the same. And I think we start with our little project now, which is modeling the Krabby. Okay. So let me open up my reference images. Because I'm using a software called PureRef for all the reference images. And I'll show you what it looks like. So you see, I get it like a lot of information of how a crab looks like. And here we have Krabby and Kingler. We'll model Krabby in the first part of this introduction, and then Kingler in the second part, where we get into like a more advanced workflow. Okay, and below here is a crab I've done like some time ago, but I think it's very important to understand the anatomy just a bit. I mean, I'll show it to you, and you just have to follow my lead, so it will be easier to do. And I will actually model Krabby, but I want to give it like a more realistic look to it, like not too realistic. But I think what I don't like about Krabby is that it only has 4 legs. And as you can see, a crab has 8. So I think this is why for me, this feels a little off. Okay. So let's move it to the side. I'll just make sure that I can see everything. Okay. So what if you don't have like a second monitor like I do, where I just have like all my reference images now? Well, there's also the possibility to load images into ZBrush onto your canvas. So this is what we will do. So let's open the left tray by double-clicking on the divider. And then we go to texture, move that over. Now we want to import a texture. Okay. So now you go wherever you like your file is. I think I have it at YouTube, Crab Workshop, source files. Yes, and then there he is. There I have the Krabby. Okay. Now when I click on the image here, I can say like add it to Spotlight. And then Spotlight will pop up. Spotlight itself is a huge tool. You see like all these buttons and options you have here. We will not get into that. This would be like a whole workshop on its own, just introducing you to Spotlight. So we would just use Spotlight to place our reference image. So when you click at the center of Spotlight, you can like move the controls around. And then here on the outer ring, you have all different kinds of options. For example, the scale. So when I click on scale and then rotate to the left, Krabby gets scaled down. And then by not clicking at the center to move the wheel, just clicking off the center, I can move Krabby wherever I want him to be. Okay. But now we have this wheel here and we can't really make changes to our sphere anymore. And you see that when we go to texture, there's like this on-off button. And there it says like turn on Spotlight with Shift Z. Okay, so we can turn it off and on. That is cool. But we want to see Krabby like the whole time and still want to be able to like paint on the sphere, but nothing is happening right now. Because normally you can use Spotlight to really influence the shapes you create. Like I said, that's too much for now. But I have a button hidden in my interface that lets us continue sculpting while still viewing the imagery here. So we can press Alt-A. And then you see down below, we have this Spotlight projection button, and that is turned on. And if we turn it off, we will be able to sculpt on the sphere while still having Krabby on the side as a reference image. If you don't want to see Krabby anymore, you can just press Shift Z to turn off Spotlight. And when you want to see it again, you can press Shift Z to show it again. You can also load multiple images. So let's do that for now, because I think it's important to work with reference. And I think this is what also most beginners don't do. They just start and then get lost because you lack the visual library. I myself lack the visual library of many things too. So I almost always work with reference images. So this is why I think this part is so important. So let's import another image. Let's say of Kingler. Cool. Press on Kingler. Press on Add to Spotlight. Okay. So I can choose which kind of image I want to adjust. So I just press on Kingler, then press Scale, rotate it down. No, I want to change him. Okay. And then move it, scale it. Okay. And then just press Z to enter the drawing mode again. So when we press Z, we go into Spotlight mode. When we press Z again, we leave the Spotlight mode and are back into our drawing mode. And if we press Shift Z, we turn Spotlight, like whole of Spotlight, on and off. Okay. So let's press D again. Because we actually don't need this one for now. And I thought you could just hit delete and get rid of it. But you have to press delete down here, so it's gone. Now we only have Krabby. I'll place it at the top. Hit Z, and we can continue. And I don't need texture anymore, so I just get rid of it, close the tray, and we're good to go. Now I see, now I have that I've gotten rid of the tray. Krabby is now more into the canvas, or has been moved into the canvas. So I just move it back, hit Z, move it, hit Z again, and we're good to go. And now we can start. So I'll go all the way back to our sphere. And we will change our brush to the move brush. And now we start creating Krabby in the next chapter. See you soon.